Brothers in Oath. It has been a long day, and Temujin is very tired, but that is unimportant. He looks at the arrow he has just been given and tries to remember if he has ever seen anything as beautiful before. The arrow is far more decorated than all the others he has seen, and he has seen a lot of arrows. After all, his father is the Khan, and not just any Khan, but the most powerful and feared for many days' ride. His yurt is full of the most splendid bows and arrows hanging on the walls. Often other tribes come to visit. These tribes have beautiful weaponry too, not just spears, shields, and glinting swords, but artfully carved bows and even more exquisite arrows. So far, he has never seen an arrow like this one. It is longer than his arm, not as long as the arrows the men use, but at least 2 hands longer than the ones he and the other boys use to practice, and the carvings are so detailed that he's almost afraid to touch it. The arrowhead is not made of iron, but of bronze. This makes it weak and practically useless against anything with even thick fur, let alone against hardened leather or plate armour. Then again, this kind of arrow is not intended to be used like that. The soft metal has been engraved with artful lines and symbols, and the edges have been so carefully polished and sharpened that it could probably split a hair in half. As he looks at it, Temujin is ashamed. It is beautiful, he says. I've never seen anything so beautiful. You are a true artist. Chuzir pulls a face, as if Temujin has just said something indecent or spoken badly of the gods. He too holds an arrow in his hand, the one that Temujin has given him in return for this stunning work. He is almost convincing as he pretends to admire it, even if there is very little to admire. It is a completely normal arrow, short and not even entirely straight. Temujin has polished the iron head as much as he can, and added a few simple carvings with as much skill as his clumsy fingers allow. Chuzir is kind enough not to say anything about it. I am no artist, answers Chuzir after a noticeable pause, and in an almost offended tone of voice. Soon I shall be a warrior, he adds, with a sideways glance in Temujin's direction, although I shall never be a Khan, of course. He says these last words reproachfully. But this arrow, says Temujin. I did not make it, interrupts Chuzir. It was old man Shezen who did the carving. In return, I helped him collect firewood and peat for 3 moons. He looks at Temujin. Do you not like it? Of course, says Temujin quickly. It's wonderful, but my own arrow is so... He stops, embarrassed. But Chuzir just laughs and jabs him in the ribs so hard that Temujin will start crying if he does not stop himself with all the strength he has. That's not the point, says Chuzir, laughing, because you probably needed just as much time to carve it as I spent helping that rip-off merchant Shezen carry wood whilst he sat by the fire keeping himself warm. Perhaps that is true, thinks Temujin. Nevertheless, he is ashamed of the gift. If this were someone else, he would suspect them of trying to embarrass him by making such an exaggerated gift. But not Chuzir. Chuzier is his best friend, his only friend even, despite the fact that he is the Khan's son. Or perhaps it is because he is the Khan's son. "Come on," says Chuzier, jabbing him in the ribs again. "Let's go and try them out." Just the very idea of shooting this exquisite arrow and perhaps damaging it fills Temujin with horror. But Chuzier has already turned on his heels and run off, so Temujin follows him. He runs as fast as he can, but he just cannot keep up with Chuzier and will probably lose him. Chuzier sees that his best friend is having trouble and slows down, then stops entirely. Nevertheless, Temujin is completely out of breath when he too gets to the top of the hill. Chuzier does not say anything, but he cannot stop himself from grinning. Not that he tries for one moment either. "I bet I get to the trees before you," Chuzier says. He is not even breathing heavily, while Temujin's lungs are burning like fire, and his heart is beating so hard he thinks it might burst. "What a cheek," thinks Temujin to himself, and then he turns to Chuzier. "Why don't you just tell me what I have to do for you?" he asks grumpily. "After all, I shall have to do it anyway when I lose the bet, so I might just as well save my strength." Chuzier grins and makes as if to jab him in the ribs again, but he just runs around and starts strolling towards the woods. Temujin follows, cursing himself for what he has just said. Of course, Chuzier will never tell anyone anything about it. Temujin is his friend after all, and they are about to become brothers in oath. Yet if one of the other boys has heard what he has said, then it will just lead to more rumours in the village, and his father will not like that at all. He will have to be more careful about what he says. The two young warriors reach the trees at the same time. Chuzier takes his bow from his shoulder, loads it with Temujin's arrow, and inspecting it closely, draws it halfway back. There he holds it, waiting until Temujin too has cocked his bow. He nods the signal to shoot, and then draws back his bow in a movement as smooth as it is strong. "Forever," he says. "Forever," echoes Temujin. Their arrows fly off with a twin crack. Despite being too short, bent, and warped, Temujin's arrow, sped by Chuzier's bowstring, flies almost twice as far as the richly decorated work of art that he himself has shot off. It must have flown at least 200 paces, perhaps even 300, before burrowing into the ground halfway between the trees and the river bank. "Forever," says Chuzier once again, and this time, too, Temujin echoes him. Chuzier is beaming. A warm feeling comes over Temujin, accompanied nevertheless by a strange feeling of emptiness, almost of disappointment. So now they are brothers in oath. They have been talking about it since last summer, and have made preparations accordingly, and somehow he expected it to be, well, more dramatic. Taking an oath together is more than being brothers by birth. It means being bound together forever, being two parts of a whole who just happen to live in two different bodies. From this day forth, he will be willing to give his life to protect his brother if need be, and he expects this thought to be somehow elevating. Shouldn't the earth quake and the heavens open? Shouldn't there at least be a thunderclap and a few flashes of lightning? Yet there is nothing, of course. Chuzir embraces him briefly and then turns away brusquely. Let's go and get the arrows. They do not run this time, but Chuzir has almost twice as much ground to cover as Temujin to reach his arrow, and for some reason Temujin does not want to follow him. He pulls the precious arrow from the ground and wipes it down carefully. Suddenly he has an intense feeling of being watched. Perhaps the other young warriors had found out what they were doing. Temujin turns round and stiffens. His hunch is true, except that he is not just being watched, he is being stalked. It's a dog, almost as big as a foal, but far heavier. It is a shaggy-coated monstrosity with huge teeth dripping with yellow slaver, and it is standing about 10 paces behind him at the edge of the forest, staring at him. Temujin can feel his heart faltering. He hates dogs and is afraid of them more than anything else in the world. He grips the arrow tighter, but although his life might now depend on it, something seems to be stopping him from drawing the bowstring. The dog might kill him. Perhaps it does not want to, but it can, and this thought is more than he can bear. "Temujin, shoot!" cries Chuzir at almost the same moment as he releases his bowstring. The arrow whizzes past Temujin's cheek, stroking him with its feathers. As the arrow hits the ground just over a man's length away from the dog, it lets out a frightened yelp and runs off with its tail between its legs. "Temujin, shoot!" shouts Chuzir again. "What are you waiting for?" Temujin hears Chuzir's steps and sees the huge dog bolting like a hare towards the trees and disappearing into the undergrowth. Chuzir reaches him, tears the arrow from his fingers, and faster than Temujin's eyes can follow, loads it into his bow. He draws the string back behind his ear, and then he lets out a moan as he drops the bow. The dog is gone. "Why did you do that?" he asks angrily. "Why didn't you shoot?" Because the arrow," stutters Temujin. Chuzir looks at him with a frown, and Temujin continues to speak with a nervous smile. "I was afraid of breaking it, as it is so valuable." This only makes Chuzir angrier, but he says nothing more, pressing his lips together out of rage and stomping off past him to fetch his dart. Temujin knows what will happen in the night. The dragon will come to him and show him what he has missed. The Dream Dragon. Temujin goes to bed unusually early this evening. Most evenings his mother has to tell him to go and leave the men to sit round the fire in peace, as is their right. All too often he stays up until his father puts his foot down. Only then does he do as he is told, and goes into his little yurt pitched right next to his father's tent. He has been sleeping alone here since last summer. Today, however, he cannot wait to go. He gulps down his dinner, makes an excuse, and goes to bed before sunset. As is always the case when trying to sleep, it takes a long time for him to sink into slumber. He has barely fallen asleep when Sarantoya comes to him. Just like every time, Temujin feels her presence more than he sees it. Well, in the first moments, in any case. It is something big, infinitely soft, but also infinitely old and strong, that steals into his dreams and only slowly takes on a form. "I haven't seen you for a while," he says. "I didn't feel that you needed me," answers Sarantoya. The shadowy figure in his dream starts to become clearer. At the edge of his consciousness, something big, something ancient, stirs, glinting like moonlight on silver scales. It touches his soul. He feels warmth and comfort, and thinks he almost sees something. Almost. "Why did you do that?" asks Temujin. Sarantoya squints as the moonlight in the dream breaks on her scales and then flows down her flanks, jingling lightly, as if somewhere far away 1,000 cymbals are being struck. It is always night in Temujin's dreams when Sarantoya comes to him, and there is always a full moon. He has stopped being surprised by it. "What did you say?" she asks him. Temujin has to force himself not to get angry. Despite her huge claws and sharp fangs, Sarantoya hates strong feelings like anger and fury. She is the most peaceful creature Temujin has ever come across. "You know very well what I mean," he says, just managing to keep control of himself. "That dog! Why did you stop Chuzir killing it?" "Did I?" replies Sarantoya, pretending to be surprised. Then she laughs quietly. It sounds like thunder rolling in the mountains on the horizon. "What if your friend Chuzir just missed?" "Nonsense," replies Temujin. "Chuzir is the best shot I know. He never misses his target." "Not even with a bent arrow?" says Sarantoya mockingly. Temujin ignores this comment. "He never misses his target," he insists. "Well then, it must be that somebody wanted him to miss," says Sarantoya, smirking. "You!" "No," says the dragon, suddenly in a very serious tone of voice. "I would never do anything you do not want, and you know it." Temujin says nothing more. Chuzir said nothing after missing. He simply walked on for a few moments, offended. The way he looked at Temujin showed that he knew exactly who he blamed for his unusual failure. Perhaps Chuzir actually knows that it is Temujin's fault. Temujin has already told him once about his dream dragon, but Chuzir's reaction was such that Temujin has never mentioned it again. It was years ago now, and Temujin does not know if Chuzir remembers it at all, but you just never know. "You didn't really want to kill the dog," continues Sarantoya after a while. "But I was afraid of him," answers Temujin. "I know," says Sarantoya with a sigh. "But you don't need to kill everything you were afraid of. Do you remember the first time you saw me?" "Of course I do." "You were afraid of me, too." "No, I wasn't," claims Temujin, although this is a downright lie. He almost died of fright the first time the dragon appeared to him in a dream. "So," continues Sarantoya, "did you want to kill me because of that?" "Of "Course not," answers Temujin, outraged. "I would never—" "Kill anything that hasn't done you any harm," says Sarantoya, finishing his sentence for him. "I know. If it were any different, I would never have come to you." Temujin does not really understand what she is saying, but he isn't in the mood to ask questions. Sarantoya says many odd things that he does not understand. "What do you want?" he asks reluctantly. For once, Temujin's anger seems to amuse Sarantoya, perhaps because she too feels that in reality it is only directed against himself. "Really, it should be me asking you these questions," she answers. "If I remember correctly, you were the one who called me, and not the other way round. Since I'm here anyway, tomorrow is a big day for you, a very important day." Temujin thinks as hard as he can. Tomorrow? Tomorrow? "How so?" he asks sceptically. "It's a surprise," says Sarantoya, teasing him. "You will meet someone who will become very important to you." "Who?" asks Temujin. Yet Sarantoya does not even answer. She disappears with a silvery, bright laugh. The Warrior. His father, Tamer, wakes him the following morning before the sun has come up. This is nothing unusual. Most people in the village get up before dawn, and only very rarely does Temujin sleep past sunrise. If he does, it is mostly when his father has been up too long drinking or discussing matters with the other men, both of which have the same result. What is unusual, however, is his father's grumpy mood and his even grumpier face. This is the first thing Temujin sees as he opens his eyes. Tamer is a great warrior, no doubt, who has killed many enemies and brought the tribe to respect and riches, but at the bottom of his heart he is a friendly man, a gentle one, especially where his son is concerned. This morning, however, he is not at all gentle. In fact, he seems furious as he grasps his son's shoulder and shakes him roughly to wake him. If Temujin were not as sleepy, he would understand that his father really is furious. He rubs his eyes and looks astonished as his father goes back to the small entrance to the tent and motions him to follow. Just like every morning, they look after the horses and drive the sheep onto the pasture without saying a single word to one another. Then they go down to the river to wash themselves in the icy waters of the Oman. Then his father breaks the uncomfortable silence. "Chuzir told me about the dog," he says, his voice full of reproach. Temujin looks at him. He is not quite sure what Chuzir has told his father, and so saying nothing is probably the cleverest thing to do. His father sighs deeply. "When are you going to finally become a man, my son?" he asks. "You are my only son, Temujin, and one day you will take my place and become Khan. But how will you be able to do that if you are still a mere boy?" Temujin does not answer. His father does not want an answer. He can feel this, and this is not the first time they have had this talk. Tamer may not yet have said it as directly as he has now, but Temujin knows very well that it is a great source of pain to him that his only son will not grow into the great warrior he wants him to be. Temujin may be a passable bowman, may be a good rider, and may just about know how to handle a sword and shield, but that is not enough. The other boys are better than he is, even the younger ones. It is not so much a question of his ability, his skill, or even his courage. It is just that he doesn't like weapons. He has never really understood where the glow in the eyes of the warriors comes from when they speak of all the enemies they have slain. "Chuzir told me," says his father, picking up where he left off, "that you were scared stiff of the dog as it stood in front of you." "It was a very big dog," answers Temujin, "and it was very dangerous." This must have been the wrong answer, because Tamer's face becomes even darker. "Did it attack you?" he asks. Temujin keeps silent. His father turns suddenly and walks back towards the village with such big strides that Temujin has to struggle not to fall back. His father does not look at him as he starts talking again. "Dogs, Temujin, are, after horses, our most loyal friends. They help us to watch our sheep, to keep our food supplies free of rats, and they warm us in winter when the fire no longer burns enough. There is no need to be afraid of them." "But it was growling at me," says Temujin in his defence. He is not sure if this was actually the case, and it is clearly not the answer that Tamer wants, because now he is really furious. "But it didn't attack you, did it? And even if it had, you would have had to have killed it like a warrior. You had your bow with you, didn't you?" "Yes," answers Temujin dejectedly. "I am sorry, father." "Be silent!" shouts Tamer. "You are the son of a Khan. You shall never say you are sorry to anyone about anything, not even to me. If you make a mistake, be sure not to do it again, but never apologize." "Yes, father," replies Temujin. He almost adds, "I am sorry." They cover the rest of the way back to the village in silence. As they reach it over the hill, the village is now wide awake and busy at work. They hear children shouting, an ox mooing, and in the distance the thunder of horses' hooves. When they get to Tamer's yurt, which, as is his right, is the biggest in the village, big enough to take in all the men in the entire tribe, they find it empty. This is unusual, and Temujin wants to leave the tent and go about his daily work, which he has now neglected too long. But Tamer calls him back with a lordly movement of his hand, and gestures him to stand in the middle of the tent. Temujin is confused, but obeys his father. His heart is beating hard. He has been hoping that this is all over, but it seems that his father has not finished yet. Perhaps what Tamer has just said is only the beginning. His heart starts to beat even faster, and he clenches his fists so that his father does not see how badly his fingers are shaking. Tamer is moving around behind him, and Temujin asks himself what he is actually doing. He does not dare to turn around, but keeps staring at the ashes of the fire. Finally, his father returns and throws something to the ground in front of him. It takes Temujin a while to recognize it as the full outfit and weaponry of a warrior. There is a leather tunic and belt, a fine woven chain-mail shirt, boots with artfully engraved metal plates, a breastplate and shield, a precious bronze helmet, and a broad, decorated weapon belt wrapped around a beautifully forged sword. There is everything he needs to be a warrior. "Put it on," says Tamer. Temujin obeys his father, but he is becoming more and more nervous. He knows of the existence of warriors' clothing because Tamer has told him about it. His father always stresses that it is reserved for very special occasions, and Temujin has never seen it before. He does not dare ask questions, but looks quizzically at his father while putting on the outfit. Finally, Tamer breaks the silence himself. "Today is a special day," he begins, and watches closely every movement Temujin's nervous hands make. "And I want you to make a good impression. Behave yourself, and do not bring shame upon our clan or upon me, your father. And do not worry, I have told our warriors to chase all the dogs out of the village until our visitor has left." Temujin feels his ears going red and sinks his head in shame. "Who is coming to visit?" he asks nonetheless. "My brother in oath, Belmin, the Khan of the Voshon tribe," answers Tamer. "Have you heard of them?" "Yes, father," answers Temujin quietly. The Voshon? Of course he has heard of them, as well as of Belmin, their wise and mighty Khan. Belmin became his father's brother in oath when he and Tamer were the same age as Temujin and Chuzir are now. The Voshon tribe has far more land than Tamer's tribe and is much, much richer. It is told that their herds are so big that if all their horses were to be driven together at once, they would cover the steppe from horizon to horizon. The Khan's yurt is said to be covered in pure gold. Despite this wealth and power, it is told that they are a very peaceful tribe, and many warriors laugh at them, as long as Tamer is not around to defend the honour of his brother in oath. Temujin buckles his sword belt and then reaches for his helmet. He thinks for a moment about whether to put it on now, but then decides against this and puts it under his left arm. His father eyes him for a moment, looks him up and down, and then nods his approval. "And what is so important about this visit for me?" asks Temujin. "Who am I meeting?" Tamer looks at him surprised, and Temujin wants to slap himself in the face for having asked this question. It is Sarantoya who has told him that he will meet somebody who will affect his future, not his father. He has said nothing. He looks at Temujin for 2 or 3 heartbeats in a way that makes Temujin really very uncomfortable. Then, however, he answers his son's question. "You are old enough now, my son, and soon you will be a man. It is time to find you a wife." "A wife?" Temujin is beyond surprised. He was ready for anything, just not that. "But "You are old enough, my boy," interrupts Tamer. "At your age, I was already married. Belmin is bringing his daughter, Arbessa. She is just 1 year younger than you, and, so I have heard tell, very beautiful. And of course a link between our tribes would be to everyone's advantage." "But I don't know this girl at all," protests Temujin. As he has expected, his father's face darkens. Moments later, however, a sudden and unusually gentle smile spreads across his face. "Son, I would never force you to marry anyone you do not want to, but have a look at her at least. I ask for no more than that, and perhaps you will like her. She will definitely like you, I'm very sure of that." Temujin looks quizzically as Tamer stops talking and bends down to pick up a polished silver plate left from the previous evening's feast. There are streaks of dried sheep's milk and bits of food stuck to it, but Temujin can still see his own reflection in the mirror and understands what his father means. He really does look like a warrior, magnificently equipped and wild, with his hair braided, his strong features, and his lively light blue eyes. Who would be able to resist him looking like this? Temujin is about to make a jokey remark about this, when he thinks he feels movement behind him. It is a kind of golden shimmering, like moonlight breaking on polished scales. He quickly checks behind himself, but sees nothing. When he looks back at the plate, however, he sees Sarantoya reflected behind him, this time even more clearly than in his dream. She looks at him, and she, too, sees the warrior which this wonderful armour, sword, and helmet have made him into. The big gold dragon looks sad. New arrival. Belmin does not come until the sun is well past its highest point. Nevertheless, as befits someone of his rank, he travels with a large entourage. Several riders have arrived before him to give advance notice of his arrival. The whole village gathers to welcome him fittingly. Temujin, of course, has a place in the first row, right next to his father and the other warriors. However, Temujin does not start towards the group until the baggage train can be seen on the hills in the west. He is not in much of a hurry to get there, and in even less of a hurry to meet either his father's brother in oath or his daughter. He has got nothing against girls, and knows as well as the next man that the children of tribal chiefs get married to each other in order to increase their power and to secure an often all too insecure peace. He should not be surprised that his turn has now come. He has simply believed that he has a little more time, perhaps another summer, maybe 2. Of course, he will not dare to defy his father, but he has mixed feelings about this meeting with his father's brother in oath and, above all, the daughter. As befits their status, the other boys, including Chuzia, wait at an appropriate distance behind the warriors and the elders, yet in front of the women still. Temujin has to walk past them in order to join his father on time. He ignores the other boys, as usual, but greets Chuzia and is about to set off even faster. Yet he notices Chuzia's dark expression of face, and turns round to him, his brow furrowed quizzically. Chuzia avoids his gaze, and turns away. "What is wrong?" asks Temujin bluntly. He is confused. "Nothing," replies Chuzia curtly. Temujin stretches his hand out so as to seize him by the shoulder, but Chuzia steps back quickly, and Temujin pulls back his arm. He feels a faint but deep stabbing pain in his chest. Chuzia is his brother in oath. "You must hurry, Temujin," says one of the other boys. "Otherwise you, our future Khan, will arrive too late to greet your bride." Temujin flashes his eyes at the boy, but does not say anything. Ilan, the boy, is 2 heads taller than him and doesn't like him. Temujin dislikes him too, and feels that he will have to fight him one day. Yet he does not want it to be now, so he offers Ilan nothing more than a contemptuous look and makes to go on. Ilan, however, continues in a mocking tone. "Don't you worry, we will make sure that nothing else gets in the way of our future Khan and his bride. Woof, woof." This comment was followed by laughter from all around, and Temujin feels a sudden fury so strong that he wants to jump at the bigger boy and pummel him. Yet his fury dies away as quickly as it comes, and gives way to something very different and much, much worse. His eyes fill with burning tears, and he turns back to Chuzia. He steps so close to him that no one else can hear him speak. "Why did you tell them about it?" he whispers. His voice is shaking. Chuzia avoids his gaze again. Temujin waits for him to answer the question, but he says nothing. So Temujin turns away angrily, and walks away as quickly as he can without running. Behind him the boys are laughing, and a few of them bark again. Temujin keeps his back turned to them, but it costs him all the strength he has to hold back the tears. His father seems very angry when he arrives next to him, but he does not have the time to say anything to him because, in that moment, the baggage train is coming by. Taimur simply looks at his son angrily, in a way that seems to promise punishment later. Then he straightens his shoulders and gets ready to greet his guests. Belmin is an older, white-haired man with a white beard that reaches his chest. He has a weather-beaten face and exudes an aura of dignity and power that you can almost reach out and grasp. Temujin has often met men who have great power, including his father, of course. But Belmin differs from them in one important point. He's the first chief he has ever met who does not carry a weapon. His large entourage, too, is mostly unarmed. Just the 2 knights right and left of him have spears held upright in their hands, and it looks to Temujin somehow as if they only have them to tie their pennants to, which are fluttering above their heads in the wind. Taimur greets his noble guest effusively, using the complicated and wordy greetings common to his people. Temujin uses this time to have a closer look at the many people accompanying the Khan of the Vauchon. Of course, there is a very particular person he is looking for, and he finds her a little behind Belmin, flanked by 2 knights who, contrary to his first impressions, are heavily armed. She is slender, wrapped up in exquisite garments, and about a hand shorter than him. She has to be Arbessa, his future wife. Her face is veiled, so he cannot quite recognize its features, but he thinks he sees her keen stare through the material and quickly looks away. The greeting ceremony goes on for quite some time, but eventually it is over, and Belmin makes a brief gesture, allowing his entourage to sit. Milk, as well as other stronger drinks, are offered, along with a meal, and suddenly the ceremonial silence, previously broken only by the exchange of formalities between the Khans, gives way to general laughter and pats on the shoulder as the more than 30 riders start to mix with the population of the village. Arbessa, too, slips down from her horse with a smooth movement, yet Temujin does not find the right moment to approach her, or even to look at her. Taimur puts his hand on his shoulder and pushes him in between himself and Belmin. "This is my son, Temujin," he says. The old Khan looks at him with his strangely soft eyes for a few instants. Despite the tangible aura of softness and goodness he exudes, Temujin, who is already very uncomfortable, is almost afraid of him. Then the Khan smiles suddenly. "So, you are Temujin," he says. "I have heard a lot about you. I am told that you are a son who is every bit as honourable as his father. Is this true?" Temujin does not know what to answer, and simply lowers his head in shame. In this situation, this is almost an insult. Taimur is horrified and sucks in air sharply past his teeth. Belmin, however, just laughs, quietly and benevolently. "Well, I see he really is his father's son. My brother in oath was never one for too many words." Taimur laughs, but even his laugh sounds hollow, and he puts another hand on Temujin's shoulder. It is as if he is showing Temujin off as his own property, and Temujin finds this degrading. He does not say anything, however, and keeps looking for Arbessa. The girl has already gone past him without even looking at him, as it seems to him, and is now talking with the women. The men of the tribe, too, have mingled with the village people and are eating, joking, and drinking with them. The big reception has dissolved into nothing. Only his father and his father's brother in oath are still standing, trying to look important, but they are clearly not succeeding. Taimur clearly finds the situation embarrassing. Belmin looks amused by it all. Finally, he clears his throat and gestures towards the big yurt in the middle of the village. "It was a long and tiring journey, old friend, and I am thirsty. We have not seen each other for many years, and have much to talk about." And talk they did.